For many years, Matt, reveled in the silence of this forest. Throughout my life, I had grown accustomed to its whispers, knowing every tree, every pathway, as well as my own fingers. I was a guardian of the forest, a person who connected with nature on a level that others could only dream of. My morning routine began with awakening to the melody of bird songs. I loved that sound. It reminded me that each new day welcomed me into the embrace of this green kingdom. After dressing, as I stepped out of my modest cabin, I was greeted by the cool morning air, saturated with the scent of freshness. My work was a part of me, and I was a part of it. I monitored the condition of the forest, checked the health of the trees, and cared for biodiversity. Being a forester was not just a job for me, it was a calling. My communication with these wise trees, green leaves, and lively streams made me happy. People might have thought that such a life was monotonous, but for me, it had its own rhythm, its own harmony. This forest became my home, and I was its guardian. My days passed in tranquility, and it seemed that nothing could disturb this idyllic existence. However, fate had something in store for me that would change all my foundations, and so it began. At first, I didn't pay much attention to these strange tracks, hoping they were simply the result of some wild creature passing by randomly. However, the longer I observed them, the more they turned into a puzzle I couldn't ignore. These tracks were unlike anything I had ever seen. They were too large for foxes or raccoons and too unusual to belong to a bear. None of the animals known to me in this forest could leave such prints. My knowledge of the local fauna was impeccable, but these imprints defied the usual order. I started waking up at night, thinking about these tracks. They haunted me in my dreams, leaving a strange residue of unease. I traversed the forest back and forth, trying to find some logical explanation, but they simply didn't fit into the picture of this world. Perhaps it was some new species that I was not familiar with. I delved into my books, flipping through pages, but found nothing similar. My anxieties intensified with each passing day. It felt as if something unfathomable had penetrated this forest, casting a shadow of the unknown over it. The more I sought logic in these strange tracks, the more they became mystical. They seemed to pursue me, getting closer to my cabin. In the evenings, when the forest fell silent, I heard rustling in the bushes, and something heavy moved around, leaving behind these enigmatic traces. An unknown presence hung in the air, like a ghost you can't see but feel is there. I felt as though I were being watched, and this thought haunted me. At night, I heard footsteps around the cabin, but upon going outside, I found no one. I continued to work, but only in the daylight. Every sound, every movement of the trees could be signs of an approaching unknown. The rifle became my guide and support. Yet even with armed hands, I felt vulnerable in the face of this mysterious entity that seemed to observe every step I took. One day, looking up towards the impenetrable part of the forest, I noticed it. Something covered in thick, black fur, towering over 2.5 meters, with humanoid features. The gaze of the entity and mine intersected for a moment, freezing the blood in my veins. I sprinted towards my cabin, daring not to look back, and spent the entire night inside, awaiting the next day, relying solely on the sunlight, the only ally in this struggle against something that lurked in the shadows. With the dawn, as the first rays of the sun pierced through the branches, I resolutely decided to uncover what lurked in the depths of this forest. My experience as a forester and hands armed with a rifle carried confidence, but even the boldest confront the unknown. The tracks led me deeper into the forest, where even the most seasoned hunter rarely ventured. And there, amidst thick undergrowth, I saw it. It was something that defied description, a creature from the realm of nightmares. The face, flattened and covered in fur, resembled a nightmarish hybrid of a bear and a human. Its anatomy seemed grotesque and alien. A wide mouth with sharp teeth added horror to this strange being. The creature remained oblivious to my presence and continued moving deeper into the forest. My legs pulsed with determination, and I decided to follow it. At some point, I startled a nearby flock of birds, and the creature noticed me. It turned out to be even more intimidating and massive than I had thought. Now, standing before it, I realized its unnaturalness and understood that I was facing something beyond the scope of my experience. Gigantic, vivid orange eyes stared at me intensely, and I felt a chilling gaze piercing my soul. The creature was like a living nightmare, a creation that seemed out of place in this world. My resolve wavered, and terror took hold as I realized that my rifle, once capable of handling bears, now seemed powerless against this entity. A gunshot shattered the silence of the forest, and in that moment, I felt the fate of this strange creature become inextricably linked with mine. Its cry pierced the air, filling it with an ominous echo. However, despite visible signs of pain, it did not immediately fall. Instead, the creature darted into the forest, its shadow disappearing among the trees. A mix of adrenaline and fear compelled me to run back to the cabin. Sounds echoed behind me, intensifying with each step I took. Suddenly, I realized that the creature I had shot had decided to seek revenge. Its swift footsteps drew nearer, and I could feel my body drenched in cold sweat. For long minutes, I raced through the thickets, my heart pounding furiously and my lungs burning. The sounds of pursuit became more persistent, as if the creature had transformed into an unseen force ready to engulf me. As I approached the cabin, I felt my strength draining from my legs. My gaze anxiously scanned the surroundings, trying to catch any signs that I was undoubtedly being pursued. The creature was determined not to let me go, and I knew that my life, once again, depended on the sole decision I could make in that moment. My legs, as heavy as stones, finally reached the cabin. With the last reserves of adrenaline, I forcefully slammed the door, creating a reliable barrier between me and the monster that was pursuing me. Yet even through the thick wooden door, the sounds of its ominous roar penetrated. The silence in the forest was shattered by this howl, emanating from the depths of the woods, filling the air with fear and apprehension. I had to make a difficult decision: either stay in the cabin and confront something I couldn't even see, or gather the last of my strength and escape. Hearing the creature beginning to break down the door, I realized I had no choice. I fired all the rounds from the chamber towards the doors, and the bullets pierced the wood with a dull, unsettling creak. The creature screamed in pain, and I heard its footsteps receding. It was only a temporary respite, and I understood that the monster would return, ready for cruel vengeance. Deprived of choices, I reloaded the rifle and sprinted in the opposite direction into the forest, seeking salvation. 15 kilometers from my cabin lay a village, my only chance for rescue. Fear consumed me, and I ran through thick thickets, feeling my life hanging by a thread. My legs, almost refusing to obey, carried me through the darkness of the forest. The sounds of the creature's enraged cries behind me emphasized that it was not intending to retreat. With each step, the darkness thickened, and I could hear the evening chorus of nature being replaced by the ominous howl of my pursuer. Exhausted and frightened, I reached the village, where the surprised and fearful residents let me into one of the houses. There, as I caught my breath, I heard an old grandmother of the village begin to unveil ancient legends about the master of the forest, a being capable of regeneration and impervious to mortal weapons. She recounted how many hunters had disappeared in this forest, attempting to hunt the master. However, having ventured into these dark lands, I had encountered it face to face and managed to survive. It was astonishing for me to learn that the creature, indeed, was the master of the forest, and it wouldn't let me leave so easily. That night, I realized that I had witnessed something beyond the bounds of reality, and I had managed to escape certain death. Yet, this story remained in the depths of the forest, in that dark realm where the echoes of the ancient creature's howls resound, its secrets shrouded in mystery like the darkness of this enigmatic corner of the world.